This is Chris Pearlman, CEO of Aggregate Sports, and this is the Sports Business Conversations podcast from ADC Partners.
Hey, this is Dave Almy of ADC Partners, and thanks for stopping in to check out this latest episode of the Sports Business Conversations podcast. There's a line from Arthur Miller's play, Death of a Salesman, that's always stuck with me. It's when the memory of Willy Loman's successful older brother, Ben, is encouraging him to persevere when the going gets tough. Ben says, "The jungle is dark but full of diamonds, Willy. One must go in to fetch a diamond out." This episode's guest, Chris Pearlman, the CEO of Aggregate Sports, well, suffice it to say he knows a thing or two about fetching diamonds out. Pearlman is a sports business lifer, getting his start with legendary sports agency ProServ. After some stops along the way, including managing business operations for the Premier League's Swansea City FC, Chris is now out on his own with Aggregate Sports. His goal? Finding diamonds by aggregating the rights for multiple national governing bodies of Olympic sports. In our conversation, Chris shares insights from his diverse career journey in sports. We go into his grounded approach to sports business, bridging cultural issues as COO of Swansea City, the decision to launch Aggregate Sports with longtime colleague Rem de Rohan, and much, much more. So thanks for checking out this conversation with Chris Pearlman of Aggregate Sports. Hope you enjoy the show. Chris, your early years were spent primarily on the agency side, right? You did a little work with ProServ. I mean, that's boy, if there's a classic name in sports business, ProServ is probably it. You went to Premier Sports Entertainment, little Wyatt Van Wagner after that acquisition. So I think a lot of people often talk about the lessons they learn in their formative years in sports business. And I'm wondering, what sticks with you today that you learned back then at the onset of your sports business career?
When I was at ProServ, one of the first kind of company-wide meetings I ever went to in my career, it was like a company brainstorm where they were talking about they wanted to lean in to the importance of clients and how the clients are such an important part of the business. They're discussing literally putting on the business card at ProServ. The phrase that I remember it to this day, the phrase that they were going to put on was cult of the client. And I think it kind of morphed ultimately into culture of the client, but they wanted to talk about just how important their clients were. And, and that has certainly stuck with me. They ended up not doing it, but it was more just the mindset of the organization and the direction that they wanted to go.
Yeah, kind of nerve-wracking for you that you thought you joined a cult for a minute. You were kind of like, as the new guy, just quick point.
Exactly. What have I got myself into? No, but it's like, but the mindset of an agency when you're representing, properties and people, it's the clients are our lifeblood, right? It's their success is our success, and without them, we wouldn't exist.
And it's kind of interesting, too, with ProServ, you're dealing with individuals, right? So you're building relationships with the athletes and all those kinds of things. But that really carries over to beyond that, doesn't it, right? It's a skill set that when you learn it at an interpersonal level, really carries forward when you're dealing with big businesses, too.
Without question.
From that standpoint.
No, for sure. And ProServ did have obviously most known as an agency that did athlete representation, but they did have a property representation business. They were one of the first agencies to do naming rights. They did corporate consulting back in the day. I think that kind of mindset is super, super important. And, when you have an agency, you're existing to help other, whether it's people or leagues or federations or teams or whatever it might be. You need to go in with that mindset. It's really about them. It's not about you.
It's almost a screwy little business that way, from the standpoint of your whole business. Like, growing your business is totally predicated on the idea of growing other people's businesses.
Yep. No, for sure. That's exactly right. That's what you sign up for on the agency side, without question.
Now, I've hosted a few people on this show who've been on the agency side and enjoyed it, but then they kind of got this itch, right? They've been working alongside sports teams and properties and things, and they go, kind of maybe want to have my hands more firmly on the levers. Now, and you did this. I mean, you made a big pivot at one point when you left Van Wagner. And you went to go work for Swansea City Football as their COO. Now that's a pivot. How did that come together? And then I'm interested in how it both met and did not meet your expectations.
Sure. Well, we could have a podcast. It used to be a one question podcast, and I could
volume 3.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it came together actually because the group that was buying Swansea City at the time, a guy by the name of Jason Levian, owned DC United. And we were in the pitch process, or I was in the process of helping to pitch Van Wagner representing DC United for stadium naming rights for what would ultimately become Audi Field. And I was having conversations with Jason and pitching our services. And throughout the course of our conversation, I should preface this by saying I've always been a big soccer fan. And, people who work in the sports business are sports fans, generally speaking. And I've had the good fortune of working on behalf of a number of different sports and properties. I've always had a special place in my heart for soccer. And I followed the sport closely. And as I was pitching our services for the naming rights assignment, he was asking me a million questions about the Premier League. And he had said, literally, it was like an hour and a half into a lunch we were having. He's like, I'm actually looking to buy a Premier League club. That's why I'm kind of needling you with these questions. And I said, literally almost half jokingly, like, well, if that ever comes to fruition and you're looking to somebody to help run the club, let me know.
Kidding, not kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Well, long story short, 6 months later, I see him again, and he said, Chris, good news, we won the naming rights assignment. So they were a client of ours. And he said, Chris, when you said that, and we were having that conversation, that you would be interested in doing that, it's like, were you being serious? Because I'm about to close this deal. I didn't even know the team at the time. I'm about to close this deal, and I am looking for somebody to help to run the club. I was like, well, let me have a conversation with my wife, who's
right,
who's gainfully employed and does a very nice job in New York, and 2 kids at the time, 9 and 10.
Right. So this is a pretty big decision.
It's a big decision, and in hindsight, sometimes I think back about it. I was like, geez, I don't believe I made the decision kind of with such confidence, but I did, and I knew it would be a wonderful opportunity, both personally and professionally. My children were young enough where it wouldn't have I didn't think a detrimental impact on their development. Probably a positive impact. I was hopeful. I didn't know how long it would be for, and a host of other things, but ultimately, it turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful decision to go do that.
And how, as someone who's clearly and obviously steeped in U.S. sports and U.S. sports business, what struck you about working overseas? Because, I mean, as much as you can kind of talk about it, Premier League fanship it's a different animal altogether. So
here's a call coming through. I apologize.
No worries at all. So how did that manifest itself? Was there like a holy mackerel moment for you when you got over there and sort of felt the passion of it that was different, or the expectations of it were different? How did that really land for you when you were arrived at Swansea?
I mean, I guess in a handful of ways, I would say, first and foremost, the fact that I'd be walking down the street in the city center, and people would be stopping me, wanting to talk about the club. Randomly, Swansea's not it's the second biggest city in Wales, but
yeah, it's the second biggest city in Wales.
Yeah, but it's 200. It's not a massive city.
Right.
People knew who the club is, the center of attention there, and a lot of people knew who I was. So that was, I think that's just, that would happen quite a bit, and that was not unusual.
And you're also introducing American business practices to a club that's rooted in, I don't even know, like 200 years of tradition, or however it's going to be. How was that received, and how well did it go in implementing the kinds of things that you knew would be successful that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I would say, I guess, a handful of interesting, both business-wise as well as, I guess, culturally.
Sure.
On the business side, I found myself, and just some adjustments that you need to make when you're over there, just differences in culture, like having a board meeting about the stadium, and I say in the meeting, somebody brought up an issue that was a pretty complex issue that it turned out we weren't going to be able to find a solution for it. I said in the meeting, we need to table this for another time, or we need to table this conversation right now, and I knew we'd pick it up later. Tabling it in the U.S., to my knowledge, was like, put it aside, talk about it later. Tabling it there means we're putting it on the table. We're talking about it right now.
We're talking about it right now.
Let's table the issue. And everybody's like, okay, let's keep talking about it. I moved on to the next thing. People are looking at me like,
damn Yanks.
Yeah. So that's just, I guess, an example. In that way, other things, I went over there to the thought process being, at the time, Swansea had been in the Premier League for, I think, 6 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Had been run by successful Welsh business people who weren't necessarily sports marketing people, who weren't sports people.
Yep.
And the thought was, if we put the right resources and infrastructure behind the operation, we can really take advantage of the global exposure that the club's receiving. And we began to do that. There are some things that we were looking to do, what we were very successful in, raise, 40% increase in commercial revenue, more deals with global brands, all that stuff was good. Other things that you think are going to work don't work necessarily, like wanting to get fans into matches earlier, supporters showing up earlier, doing fan zones outside of the stadium. You think that's going to be a big thing, trying to enhance the match day experience, more activity in and around the stadium, things that'll help here and there. In the U.S. could be game changing. Over there, cultural changes, like fans don't come into the stadium earlier. They're at the local pub, having their pints. They're going to come in 10 minutes before kickoff. You can incentivize to try to come in, things like that. You go in with grand ambitions, and the reality is sometimes, I in some ways did not understand the culture well enough. You learn, you live and you learn. Some of the things work well, other things not as well, but that's part of the experience.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing when you're going into an established property in a very, very culture-bound way, to how do you take what you know is a great practice and you've seen it work otherwise and manage it for there. I can't even imagine. I mean, it's an ongoing learning process as you try to combine those two sets of assets together.
For sure.
Yeah. So with Swansea for a few years, come back, you have a cup of coffee managing both DC United and Swansea for Kaplan 11. And then there comes the idea about Aggregate Sports Group.
Go ahead. I was going to say, so I guess taking a step back, so Swansea got relegated between my second and third year in the UK, and that changed things significantly, right?
Yeah.
Who knows if they were still in the Premier League, perhaps I'd still be there. But getting relegated changed kind of the remit of the role, and I began to think about, okay, I moved my family over here to work for a Premier League club. It's being relegated offered a very interesting personal learning experience, different kind of business model.
Yeah.
But this is a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah.
One of the things I realized, I saw this when we were in the Premier League, and I certainly saw this once we'd been relegated, and I saw kind of the impact of relegation on clubs and the difficulty of doing what we did, which was building an internal team to monetize the Premier League exposure, where clubs of a similar size had not done that, right? And not many have done that successfully to compete with the Man Uniteds and Chelseas of the world. And I, began to think, why aren't other clubs? I knew now why other clubs weren't doing it, is because they didn't have the people. You get promoted and relegated. All teams care about is staying in the Premier League. All resources go towards staying in the Premier League. So the initial thought with Aggregate Sports actually came when I was in the UK, and it's around aggregating rights But initially the thought was around aggregating rights in European football, commercial rights across multiple Premier League clubs and championship clubs, and selling them collectively. So when I moved back, I already had that business concept and structure in mind. And when I came back here, I was working for the ownership group across both clubs. I was kind of beginning to think I want to begin to put together the pieces to do this. Now, this was in 2019 into 2020.
Perfect timing.
Exactly. So once COVID came, I pivoted this concept and that aggregation model, which I thought was one that made a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons, could work in other ways as well. And I had, through my previous life at Van Wagner, had a number of different relationships in the Olympic national sports governing body space. And that kind of became the business model and plan for Aggregate Sports to start.
Yep.
Because instead of aggregating rights in European football, do it in the U.S. Olympic space, which became, which was much more manageable at that time for a host of different reasons.
Was there a reason why? I mean, you said you had contacts with national governing bodies and things like that. You felt like you had your feet firmly planted in there. Was that the reason to pursue that, or was there something particularly appealing about the way NGBs operate, or is it kind of a confluence of both?
Yeah, both. NGBs are, by nature, they're not-for-profit organizations. They exist to help the individual sports in this country, oversee them, provide them structure, help them grow, help train the athletes that go on to represent the U.S. in the Olympics. Yep. But these organizations, generally speaking, from a business perspective, they don't have the infrastructure that professional leagues and teams in the U.S. have. They need that kind of help. They need help generating revenue. They need help on the business side. They need help with their media rights. They need help with sponsorship and media sales. So I thought there was a bit of a parallel there for sure.
You knew there was a need, and you knew also that you had the people to be able to reach out to be able to explore that need. And I mean, the idea of aggregation is such an attractive one, right? Because you look at whole greater than some of the parts. I mean, I'm even it's literally, I think, the first line on your website. To be able to package those for sponsors and media properties, right? Everybody wants to deal in volume rather than, oh my God, let's go create 10 different deals with 10 different NGBs so I can pull my hair out kind of thing. But it's hard. It's hard rolling those up. Each national governing body has an array of doing things, and they have different expectations, different wants, different needs. How do you find success where others may have stumbled in the past, pulling these pieces together? I mean, I don't want you to give away like aggregate secret sauce or anything, but it's charged. It's hard, right? These can be challenging organizations to deal with sometimes.
Yeah, I guess, first and foremost, I should mention I've got a wonderful business partner that I embarked on this journey with, Rem de Rohan, with whom I had worked at Van Wagner years before. And, he's as good as it gets in the business. So surrounding yourself with good people is super important. We've been very, very fortunate with the quality of the NGBs that we've worked with. And that's important. What we sell is of great value to brands. Not easy to sell. I'm not saying it is, but when we do make that connection with the right brand, it works for the brand. And that was where the model we thought would make sense, is if we find the right brand and the right connection and show them that it works, we would have some success. And it's not always in selling them collectively, although that could happen. It's often more because when we take our properties to the marketplace, most often, it's on an individualized basis where we're pitching the demographic and reach and specific, niche of whatever property it might be to whatever and why it makes sense for that brand. And it's very property specific at first. So, but where we've had some success is with one brand and one property, making that connection, doing a very good job, and having our partners at the properties do a very good job in helping to bring these deals to life and provide value for the partners. And then taking that and extending that partner across other properties that we have. So
they sort of get their foot wet with
Yep.
one and start to see what the potential is. And I'm assuming it probably doesn't hurt to have someone and an organization help guide that success, so they're not feeling around in the dark as they create these partnerships and how to exploit them effectively.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So yeah, so we've been very, very fortunate in that regard. We've got some wonderful properties that we represent and some super brand partners who have trusted us and put resources behind these partnerships and have leveraged them. And it's been good for the NGB for sure. It's been good for the property, and we get the benefit as well.
Let's talk about that idea of partnerships for a second, because it's changed. I mean, partnerships have changed a lot in just the last 10 years, really, when you think about it, right? You got new categories, expectations are through the roof on both sides, right? The properties want to see more revenue coming from these. The sponsors have higher expectations on what these kinds of things can deliver. How do you prepare both sides of the equation, both the NGBs and the sponsors, to prepare for that new marketplace? How do you manage expectations on both sides? Is that a conversation you actively have?
Without question. I mean, it's, you hit the nail on the head. It's the marketplace has changed considerably. I think one of the first things we did, or one of the things we've done over the past few years, is we've expanded our capabilities to help address this. So we've started a media rights consultancy where we can help, with the Olympic Channel going away, NBC Sports Network going away, getting this content distributed for a lot of these properties has become a little bit trickier. Providing a resource for us to help do that for them, right? To help guide them through that, to make sure that their content can get distributed effectively, so it can be monetized effectively from a sponsorship standpoint, and so people can still have access to it. So that's part one. From a sales standpoint, it's broadening what the offering is. It's a lot more social media is part of the partnership packages, incorporating athletes in a much more significant way because they have their own, ways to connect with fans through their social media channels. So incorporating athletes into deals. There's a lot more custom content that's being developed in coordination with the property and the brand, and looking for creative ways to do that. It's not as easy as it was in terms of, hey, you're on NBC this weekend and you get a 30-second spot and it costs X amount of money and have some signage there that's still a part of it without question. But we do have to get more creative and extract value from these other areas. And we've been fortunate. We've been able to do it in a lot of instances. But you have to be thoughtful in how you do it. You need to have properties that are willing to work with the brands to come up with the right solutions. It needs to make sense. It needs to be organic, obviously, to what the property is doing already. But we've been able to do it, fortunately.
I think you hit upon a really important point there, is how do you change to meet the moment? Right? I think where a lot of agencies get stuck is operating in that long time, it's a tough word, but transactional mindset, which is, I'm going to pair you with the Olympics and you get these spots and you get the rights to do the following things and we'll help facilitate all that. Now it's, okay, here's this property. How does this appear on socials? How does the athlete use it? How can we create campaigns that sort of weave in and all this kind of stuff so that you separate yourself from all the noise? This is an important skill set to have.
Yeah. And I should also mention, it's not just Rem and me. We've got a bigger team that helps to do that. One of my old clients, Ramsey Baker, who used to be the CMO and then became the executive director of U.S. figure skating, we hired, who works for us in Colorado Springs, and he is our point person with a lot of the Olympic federations we work for. It's good to have somebody internally who understands that world really, really well and could help kind of be a bridge between what we're seeing in the marketplace and what the NGBs go through on a day-to-day basis and help to tell that story. So, yeah, it's I don't know if there's a magic formula for it, and what works for one property may not work for another, what works for one brand may not work for another. But we're certainly diligent in trying to figure it out and uncover the opportunities and where we can, leverage them.
Yeah. So the Olympics are obviously quite clearly 2028 in LA.
Yeah.
How does that change the discussion for you and your partners? How does a U.S.-based Olympics differ from Paris or some of the Asian games that we've seen over the last 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah. And I probably should have mentioned this when we were talking about the initial thought about Olympic federations when we started this business in 2020, because at that time, LA had already been announced.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of the thought process, thinking, okay, this is going to be on everybody's radar down the road. It'd be great to get involved in it. I think, and I certainly saw it. You probably did too. Starting with Paris primarily, where like the buzz around the Olympics finally was back. I think Beijing was difficult. Obviously Tokyo with COVID and everything. Past 3 Olympics, I think, have been in Asia. So getting the Olympics in Paris was big for a number of reasons. I think having the Olympics in Milan Cortina in 26 is going to be big as well. Another European city where I think we're poised to do well across a handful of sports, and it all builds to LA. I think it's going to be on everybody's radar a lot more because it's LA, because it's the US. More brands are going to want to have an association with it. Our value proposition and sell to many brands is through the properties that we work with. It's an association with the movement, with a more deeper association, 365 days a year at a number of different elite events. And there's a chance to be part of that. Sometimes it's an Olympic partner who becomes partner of these Olympic federations, of these NGBs, which is great. Other times it's not, and it's a brand who's a competitor to some of the Olympic partners. It's a great way to do it. Anyway, so I guess it's a long-winded answer to your question that we see a lot of activity building in the coming years up to LA in 28. And by the way, not just that, obviously with the Salt Lake Games, following 6 years after that. So I think the Olympics will remain, I think, a very attractive property for a lot of reasons for a number of years.
You talked about launching Aggregate with your partner, Rem de Rohan, who you guys met back at Van Wagner. So can you talk a little bit about that, like your partnership with him and how you guys approached launching Aggregate and compatible skill sets, where you guys had to kind of figure out who was going to do what? How did that process unfold for the both of you as you sort of said, hey, let's do this?
Yeah. So I always say that the best sell I ever made in my career was when I was at Van Wagner and Rem was at ESPN, and we were looking to bring on a salesperson to be in our property sales group. And I through a colleague I knew at ESPN, I was like, who's the best sales planner you have? Who's probably who's probably a little too young to get promoted over the next few years, but you think who's ready to do it.
You had your filter ready.
And was introduced to Rem and convinced him to leave the comfy confines of ESPN and go to Van Wagner. And I saw it right from the beginning when we were working together at Van Wagner. He's honestly probably the hardest working person I've ever come across in the business. He's probably one of the most, if not the most professional people I've ever worked with across my career. He's diligent. He's super buttoned up. He's very, very committed. He understands the marketplace really well. He's got a lot of he's a phenomenal salesperson. He's the whole deal. Outside of my parents, he visited me in Wales more than anybody else. He came across when I was in Swansea. He went to a handful of matches. So, we obviously remained friends when I left Van Wagner. When I left Van Wagner, he took over the group that I had been running. So when I was looking to start this business, obviously he was the person that I thought of.
It's so important to have that pre-existing subtext communication that you can have. Yeah. It's a known. And we're heading out on your own path. I mean, there's so many unknowns. To just be able to have a couple rocks you can lean on where exactly what you're going to get, it just sort of removes that whole bit of brain power that you need to focus on other things, isn't it?
Yeah.
I saw a quote of yours about the importance of relationships. We just talked about Rem and his background, and clearly that's obviously a skill set of yours. And I'll read it to you. He said, "Stay in touch with people. Yep. You do it proactively, but do it in a genuine way.
Yeah.
It's such a over the top important point in this industry in particular that I want to give you a chance to expand upon that a little bit, right? That idea of being proactive but genuine, right? Can you tease that one out a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, it's your point. It's like it's an obvious thing you think about, and I remember when I was in college, I thought I was at one point going to be a lawyer, and I was.
You got off of that horse pretty quick.
Yeah. And I was in a class, and there was a lawyer that came in, and he was speaking about his experience in law, and he was at the time. I was in college, so everybody who's older seems like they're a lot older, but I think he wasn't that. So I think he's probably in his like late 20s, like at the time, and he was talking about what he liked and what he didn't like about law, and he said that the most difficult adjustment I've had to make is not the fact that I don't need to be a good lawyer, although I am. He's like, what I'm judged upon is not how good I am at being a lawyer. It's like how good I am at bringing in new clients and keeping our other clients happy. He's like, and if I can tell you guys one thing, it's the importance of networking in life and in business. And that's in the field of law. That's not necessarily a field where people think about it's important, as important certainly in sports or other business to sales to build relationships. So it's it's a life lesson that's kind of stuck with me. And the beauty of the sports business is you have the opportunity to socialize with people in some great settings all the time and in fun places. And I tell this to young people all the time who are trying to break into the business. A piece of advice, and it's the one piece of advice. Like it's just, nobody wants to seem like they're a robot and they're doing it in an inauthentic way. The cool thing about our business is there's a lot of fun people with great personalities who you want to hang out with. It's great to be friends with the people that you're transacting with. I still do business literally with people that when I left ProServ, I went to ESPN for a handful of years. I was a sales assistant there, and there's like assistant, media buyers at agencies that are now like, super, super high up that I still do business with. We got to some fun events together, and I know their families and all that stuff. I mean, so it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be real if you're not doing it in a genuine way. But you need to invest the time into doing it. And I could do a better job at it, and I'm sure but it's so important, and you can't do it enough. You really can't do it enough.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time from the standpoint of just don't be the friend who only calls when they need to borrow your pickup truck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. You check in, and it's same thing from a sales standpoint. You don't want to always call people when you want to sell them something. You want to.
Don't be a relief pitcher. Every time you get brought in, you're pitching something. That's not the way that this industry. You have to be interested in the people, the companies, and the interest. We talk about it all the time. Like your biggest asset is curiosity. Yeah. Just like, hey, what's going on? I saw this thing that your guys are doing. That's kind of interesting. How did that come about? And again, it goes back to like the top of the conversation. Like if you're not learning in this industry, it's probably time to start thinking about doing something else. And talking about doing something else. Like, look, I want to wrap up with sort of the question. I mean, when you start your own company, you start off with like, this is what you think the path is going to be. Mm-hmm. And rarely does it ever follow that exact path. So I guess I'm curious, as you think about where you are with Aggregate today and where you started the company, where has it met your expectations, and where has it kind of surprised you a little bit about where you've ended up and where you're heading going down the road?
I would start with the surprising thing. Maybe it's not surprising. I probably spent a little too much time on administrative things that I hadn't anticipated. I guess maybe I had anticipated, but the reality is a little bit bigger than the anticipation of it. I wish that weren't the case, but I guess it is. The marketplace has obviously continued to evolve, so that's kind of changed how we sell, and our it's partly COVID related. The ability to reach out to people and say, hey, I'm going to be coming through town. Can we get together when I'm there for a cup of coffee or whatever? People aren't always in the office and things like that. So it's a lot more virtual. which makes it more difficult to make connections with people.
Oh, particularly as like guys of our generation, like we grew up with the face-to-face and knocking on doors and this like,
Exactly.
can I send you a link? It's just changed the game.
I know. Yeah. The flip side is there are those instances where it would have been hard to have the meeting early anyway. So you probably are be able to get like FaceTime more than you otherwise would. But the connectivity is a little trickier.
Yeah. Different skill set.
Yeah, different skill set. And we're constantly, and this is an important part of having your own business, is just looking to diversify and grow and do different things, and always exploring new things. And kind of the media rights consultancy extension that we did is an example of that. And we've tried a few other things, and we're looking to try a few more different things over the next year or two as we begin to expand. It's fun. I enjoy it. I wake up every day excited to go to work. It's, I talked about Rem earlier. It's really great to do it with people who you like, who you enjoy working with, who are, in the foxhole with you, hiring good people, having good people that you work with, and being a mentor to people internally, some young employees that we hire who are going to be superstars in their own right as they flourish in their careers, and helping contribute to their future success is something that very happy to be a part of. As my father told me when I was thinking about being a lawyer, actually, he said, Chris, whatever you do for a living, you have to do it for the rest of your life. You want to make sure you enjoy it. Maybe that's what I realized I wasn't going to be a lawyer. It's like, make sure you enjoy it, because you have to wake up every day and go to work and do it. He just retired actually last week after 54 years of being a lawyer. It's true. I look at the smile on your face. I know you love what you do. You talk to people who are in the business on a daily basis, and you get to hear these great, stories of different people come from different backgrounds. It's fun. It's fun to make what you do for a living something that you enjoy. So
I'm with Chris Pearlman. He's the CEO of Aggregate Sports. Chris, I want to thank you for the time today. But before I let you go, I'm going to put you in the lightning round.
Gotcha.
Okay, these are questions that are the supercomputer over here has churned them out using whatever we call AI over here, which is probably my dog tapping on the keys of the laptop. So are you ready for the lightning round, Chris Pearlman?
Yes.
Okay. You and I both played Division III college lacrosse in the Northeast in the 90s.
Nice. On
a scale of 10 to 1, how insane is the position of lacrosse goalie?
11.
Yeah, it's probably up there. Like, that one goes up to 11 for sure. Yeah, and the people who play that are not right in the head. And I'm speaking about my son who played lacrosse goalie too.
Oh, really?
Okay, so you also, like you mentioned, you played soccer and lacrosse in college. Yep. Did you play lacrosse like a soccer player or soccer like a lacrosse player?
Let's put it this way. I fancied myself to be certainly a better soccer player than a lacrosse player. I'd say probably on a national level, just because there's probably not as many top level lacrosse players, I'm probably a better lacrosse player, which is like I was a soccer specialist who just happened to be able to play lacrosse, but I was probably better than other lacrosse players. I was never known for my speed in either sport. So, I think my slow feet were more of a hindrance in soccer than lacrosse.
All right, so we'll call it sort of an equal blend based on the lightning foot speed you brought to the table. How about that? All right. So as someone who deals with national governing bodies for Olympic sports, what advice would you give to the organizers of modern pentathlon to make their sport even more amazing?
Oof, boy, difficult.
Hang gliding? Maybe
that could be cool. Yeah.
I feel like it's time to mix it up a little bit. Maybe take the horses out, put hang gliding in. I don't know. It's a thing for me. I really want to explore the modern pentathlon potential.
Interesting.
Okay, yeah, just file that one away. We can have future.
That's food for thought.
Okay. Next lightning round for the next version. Okay. What city would you award Olympic Games to that's never had them?
Oh boy, jeez, New York. That'd be really cool.
That would be actually really cool. Yeah. Now, and that brings us to the last one. As we're recording this, it's about 25 degrees in New York City today, where you're based. So your preference, New York City on the hottest day of the summer or on the coldest day of the winter?
Hottest day of the summer. I have this conversation with my kids all the time. I'll take hottest day of the summer. I know my wife will certainly take coldest day of the winter.
Oh, okay. There's some duality there. Understood.
Yeah, my older son, who's at University of Chicago, will take coldest day of the winter. My younger son, going to be going to school at Rice next year. In Houston, will take hottest day of the summer. So he's on my team.
You guys got that. Chris Pearlman, I really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. It was great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And don't forget, you can always find past episodes at abcpartners.com/podcast. This podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Dave Almy. And theme music was composed by Scott Holmes.